Okay guys, in this video we're going to talk about data, and we handle data throughout the application, a couple ways of how we store data. So the next couple of videos, the first one I'm going to talk about arrays, and then in another video, a separate video, I'm going to talk about objects. Now objects get a little bit more complicated, so I'm going to try to break this down as best I can. This is just something you have to work with to get more familiar with it, and the concept is there in every language. The flavor of it's a little bit different in every language. The way that they approach arrays and objects and the semantics can change. The concept is still the same. So in every language, you have some way of creating lists and then some way of creating sort of mapped associative lists, and those are objects, and we'll talk about those later. But like I said, every language, we have some way of storing a list. And most of the time, they use these square brackets to denote a list or an array. And inside of those brackets, we can put an array of values separated by a comma. The comma is not read, it's just a way of separating these values. I can actually take and print this out here. It'll come back just like that. Here's the deal, I can put anything inside of here. Here we can put a string item here. I can put some massive number there. Here I'll separate this out, make this a little bit prettier. You can do it just like this. It doesn't have to be on the same line. I can actually continue this over multiple lines. I can put a massive number there. I could put another array right here. Oops, let's put it inside the brackets. I can put anything I want inside of this array and then iterate through it if I wanted to. And that's where we're going to start to talk about the loop. We'll talk about the loop in a different video, but just understand I can put anything inside of this list and store it. And most of the time we're doing lists and arrays. It's usually just arrays of values that are either simple bits of text or numbers a lot of times. But how would I access these values, right? So let's say I wanted to get the last value in this array. Let's say there's this array here. I want to try to get 5. I need that 5 for whatever reason. So here's how you go about getting something out, like getting a specific value from an array. We're going to use the brackets again. So we have inside this console log, I've placed this list variable, which is storing this array. I'm going to use this array to actually specifically get one of those values. How do I do that? So you'd think, well, actually, let me just go ahead and explain this. So inside of an array, each one of these values is indexed. What does that mean? So an index is basically a value associated with each one of these values that allows you to pull that value. So here's something you probably want to write down. Every index starts with 0. So if I wanted to get, we're gonna forget this question for a second. Let's say I want to get the first one here. If I want to get the first value from this list, I'm actually going to put 0 right here. It comes back with 1. Intuitively, you'd think I want to get the first value. I'm just going to put 1 there. And you'd be wrong. Because, like I said, every index starts with 0. There's just something you have to know. It's just how it's designed. Every index is going to start with 0 and then iterate higher and higher. So to go back to our original question here, I want to get number 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, but I'm actually not going to start with 1. I'm going to start with 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So if I put 3 right here, oops. There, I've now gotten the last one in this array. If I put 4 there, I'm going to get an error because there's no such thing as 4. Jeez. The cursor on this thing is so hard to see. It's undefined, doesn't exist. 4 is not in this. There is no index value of 4. It'll be right here. So that pretty much covers the concept of a list. It might be best to basically go through and talk about some of the semantics, some of the different things you're going to encounter. For instance, not every language calls this an array. In Python, it's called a list. Even in JavaScript, this is technically not called an array, even though it's conceptually the same thing. So if I actually did this, geez, can't type it all today. It actually comes back as object, even though this is basically an array. JavaScript has its own sort of array type that it's like a class, but again, this is just more or less semantics. Whenever you see brackets, 9 times out of 10, that is an array. That's what the concept here is, what we're talking about. Even though it might be called something different, that is an array. In Ruby, I think it's called an array too. And then for objects, they call them hashes because Ruby has to be different. Comes back as array, yeah. And with Ruby, it's the same thing. If I wanted to get the first one, I'm going to put 0 there. The concept's the same just about everywhere. PHP, nope. Oh no. What's it doing? Oh, I think I chose the wrong one. I needed to use the CLI. Those pesky brackets. Yeah, it comes back as a type array as well. Python's a little different though. Calls it something else. Actually, I can't use list because it actually calls it list. So call this array. I can actually leave a trailing comma there and it's fine. Comes back as class list. So in Python, they actually call it a list. There's no such thing as array, even though conceptually it's the same thing as an array. So guys, I hope that pretty much sums it up. I hope that makes sense. And once again, if I wanted to get an item, it'll be the same bracket notation here to get an item from this list. If I want to get the second one there, it comes back as 2. And this is relatively universal, where things really start to get different and weird when we get into objects, because not every language approaches objects in the same way, even though the concept is still there. Conceptually, objects are just about at least in every object-oriented programming language, they're there. But the words, the semantics, the syntax, that stuff can change pretty drastically. So that's why objects need its own video entirely. Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps this one up. Thanks for watching, guys.